Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive Perspective. We're going to unravel Islamic eschatology, something that hasn't really existed, according to my learned guest today, Sheikh Imran Hosein, a pioneer in this field, no less. It's clear that some elements of the predictions of the future, of the coming of the Messiah, the coming of the Mahdi, these are things which Islam has dealt with. It's there in the Quran, apparently. It's there, apparently, also in Hadith. But it doesn't seem to have been evolved as an entire topic on its own. But we're going to delve not only into the Islamic eschatology itself, but I want to link it to its kind of commonality, perhaps, with Christianity. Because, of course, at the heart of all of this, and the prophecies of the end of times, is the coming together of two powerful religions, in a way. Prophet Jesus Christ to the Christians, and of course Imam al-Mahdi of the Muslim order, of somebody who's going to be related or a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So the coming together of these two powerful faiths that number maybe anything up to 4 or 5 billion people in the world today is no small matter, and the belief system that will pan out, perhaps in the very near future, is something of real interest. Thank you for joining me, Sheikh Imran Hosein. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be once again on your show.
Well, I'll get straight into it. You literally are pioneering this entire field of Islamic eschatology. You've talked about Mahdaviyyah being something which the Ahl al-Tashayyu have done, and the Ahl-Sunnah have, of course, got their own hadith which talk about Imam al-Mahdi, and the mentions of Christ are all there. But tell me a little bit, first of all, about your journey, your personal journey in pioneering this.
I got a PhD scholarship to study international relations at the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Geneva, Switzerland. And I arrived there in 1974, and within 1 year I was at the top of the class, first on the row on my way to the PhD. That's how fast I was. And I chose the director of the institute, Professor Jacques Fremont, as my thesis director. But I chose a topic in Islamic eschatology, not knowing Islamic eschatology. It was post-Caliphate Islam and the search for a new Islamic public order. Professor Fremont said to me, Imran, I will be your thesis director, but you must search the world of Islam to find a scholar who has expertise in the subject, and we'll invite him to join the team directing your thesis. I then searched the world of Islam, and I could not find anyone. Why? Because my thesis was in Islamic eschatology, namely the study of the end time. And we did not have Islamic eschatology at that time as an independent branch of knowledge. The Shia did have an independent branch of knowledge in eschatology, but they didn't call it eschatology. They called it Ilm al-Mahdawiyyah, because their eschatology was built on the solitary foundation of the advent of Imam al-Mahdi, alayhi salam. And the Sunni world studied eschatology as a branch of hadith. So I am happy that I left Geneva without defending the thesis, because I would have been embarrassed today. I had no knowledge of Islamic eschatology in 1974.
Well,
I then spent the next 25 years or more to pioneer Islamic eschatology. And it was not until 2001, 25 years later, that I was able to publish my pioneering work in Islamic eschatology, Jerusalem in the Quran. However, although this was a pioneering work in the subject of Islamic eschatology, And although it has received a tremendous welcome from the masses of Muslims around the world, not only Muslims, but non-Muslims as well, the world of Islamic eschatology, the world of Islamic scholarship, both Shia and Sunni, no difference, have been completely silent up to now on my book and all the other books on Islamic eschatology. They seem to be in an intellectual and methodological quandary, how to understand me and how to respond to me. And perhaps you can give them another 25 years and they still remain silent. This is the sad story of my pioneering effort in Islamic eschatology. However, this pioneering effort is bearing fruit. My last book, which has just been published, is The Quran and Russia's Destiny. No one has ever written on this subject before.
Okay.
The Quran and Russia's Destiny. And this book is going to be launched in Moscow. This book was written as a result of the request of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's request. I met with him for dinner on a small group, about 15 of us, for 2 hours. And as a result of my conversation with him, he asked me whether I could write on the subject. I guess he was expecting an essay, about 10, 15 pages. But I did that nothing more than that. I went on for the next 5 months to write this book, The Quran and Russia's Destiny, which is Islamic eschatology par excellence. But although my eschatology is producing fruit, the world of Islam seems to be in a methodological quandary, how to respond to me.
How interesting. I mean, there are so many angles to approach this. I mean, I'd chosen the theme of Islam and Christianity and to look at where the commonalities were, or because the little research that I'd ever done made it very clear that at some point the people of Rum and the Islamic world would come together within this scenario. And in a world where, of course, there's so much division and there's like the danger of the Great War looming, the threat of conflict on all sorts of levels being engineered or otherwise, how does this eschatology, or the Islamic eschatology, converge with Christian eschatology? I mean, did you do research within on the Christian front as well, simultaneously, to understand where they're coming from?
I made a choice as a scholar, a scholarly choice, many years ago, not to comment on Christian eschatology, not to appear as a critic of Christian eschatology or an analyst of Christian eschatology. Mm-hmm. The only time I would refer to Christian eschatology is when I had no alternative. I had to do it. I did that because I felt it would be more productive and more respectful to allow the Christian to explain his eschatology. And after he has explained his eschatology, and I have explained our eschatology, that we then engage each other in respectful dialogue. There is no debate to be won. And then we jump up on the table, clapping our hands. We won the debate, like monkeys. That is not my style. That may be others. They love, we won the debate. That's their way, not mine. And because I adopted this respectful way of dealing with the Christian world, I am now living to see the fruits of it, that the Christian world is now responding to me, not the Christian world that follows Santa Claus. I'm talking about the Christian world that follows Jesus. The Christian world that follows Santa Claus, a man can marry another man and get a marriage certificate. Santa Claus taught them that. But the Christian world that follows Jesus is different. And this world is fighting, waging war on that Christian world. The two Christian worlds are at war in Ukraine. And they're waging war on that Christian world, which is more faithful to the truth, while this one is more bogus. So I have found from that Christian world, which is led by Russia, I have found a more friendly, a more positive response to my eschatology than from Washington and London and so on. And the methodological quandary in which they are is that both our world of Islamic scholarship and their world of Islamic scholarship have problems in methodology.
Well,
and for us, it's easier to solve the problem. My teacher of blessed memory, Maulana Dr. Fazlur Rahman Ansari, qualifies as the most eminent student of Dr. Iqbal. Dr. Iqbal left the world with this statement that we want a reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. That is his lasting statement before he died. A reconstruction of religious thought in Islam, because Iqbal realized that there was deficiency and defects in our methodology. And the house we had constructed was a broken down house. He was not impressed by it. Iqbal said, the world of Islam stopped thinking 500 years ago. It's there in his book.
Yes.
The reconstruction of religious thought of Islam. My teacher was the most important student of Iqbal to respond to his request for that reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. My teacher was Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fazlur Rahman Ansari, rahimahullah. And the most important thing of all that he did in reconstruction is to remind the Sunni world and remind the Shia world that the Quran had come to deliver absolute truth. Absolute truth. Well, and therefore, the Quran must be accepted without question.
This is all very good as a context for people. I've got a little idea. I mean, I've read a little bit of, for instance, Alexander Dugin, and you talked about the Russians, and we discussed the idea of Christianity. You've now dissected that into two forms of Christianity, which are at war, which is something we'll pick up later in the program for sure, because there is an ideological difference in the way it seems people like Putin and Alexander Dugin or Mr. Lavrov, the way they operate and the values and the traditions they seem to stand for, and those that are in the West, or certainly the American form of Christianity, which seems to be very Zionist leaning. So that's something to explore. But I think it's probably a good time to actually talk about some of the fundamentals. I mean, I understand from most of the Sunni and Shia predictions of the end of times, so this reference to the Mahdi and to the Messiah, there's a lot of overlap between Sunni and Shia, in terms of the predictions. There are 4 or 5 that are guaranteed within the Ahl Tashayy that talk about, the Sufyani, they talk about, the Imam Mahdi's arrival, Dajjal, all these ideas are out there. There are other characters like the Yamani they mention, the Khorasani. There's there's a set of fixed events that they think are absolutely going to happen, and then there are others which are not necessarily fixed and could be changed by the divine. So, from your perspective, what are the fundamentals of the signs, if you like, of the return of the Mahdi, and where does Jesus Christ come into all this?
Well, first of all, we're going to have to postpone my response on this critically important subject of the methodological quandary which faces the world of Sunni scholarship as well as Shia scholarship, and I was attempting to explain that from what came from my teacher, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari, rahimahullah, because the beginning of his response is to teach that absolute truth is in the Quran. The Shia world need to be reminded of that absolute truth is located in the Quran. The Sunni world needs to be reminded of that absolute truth located in the Quran, but there's so much more left in the discussion on methodology. If you are to be able to use the Quran to explain the world today, but we'll have to postpone that discussion because you have now turned to the subject of the timeline of events which will occur in the end time, in which, according to the Shia, the most important, by far, the most important event remaining to occur in history is the advent of Imam al-Mahdi. I went to Moscow for the first time in 2013, and Iran had preceded me in Moscow long before I went as a Sunni scholar. And when I went to Moscow and I met with the Russian Orthodox eschatologists, I found to my surprise, for me it was a surprise, that Islam, according to them, was one in which the most important event remaining to occur in history is the advent of the Imam al-Mahdi.
Right.
And I was surprised because that is not correct. And of course, I have to be polite with my brother, the Shia, because they are my brothers. We engage in respectful dialogue. The most important event by far, which comes from the Quran, not the Hadith, the Quran, to remaining to occur in history, is not the advent of Imam al-Mahdi, not at all. It is the return of the Messiah. The Messiah was promised to the Israelite people. Allah made a promise to them. And the Messiah came. And the Messiah was Nabi Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, the son of the Virgin Mary. And there's only one virgin who ever gave birth to a son. There'll never be another one. And he came and he left. And the Quran firmly establishes the belief that he will return. I would be very happy to engage in dialogue with anyone who differs with me on that subject. Respectful dialogue. I'm not in a boxing match, no. So I was surprised. I had to now tell the Russian eschatologists, our view is different. And when I gave them our view, that the most important event remaining to occur in history is the return of Jesus, they were very pleased to hear that. They were very pleased because that was the same thing that they believed in.
Yes.
However, the advent of Imam al-Mahdi is of pivotal importance. Pivotal importance. Why has Allah, in His wisdom, why has He ordained that an Imam al-Mahdi will emerge at the end of history? Answer. Why did Allah teach the Quran to Nabi Isa alayhi salam? This is there twice in the Quran that Allah taught the Quran to Nabi Isa alayhi salam.
So Christ was taught the Quran.
In the Quran, Allah has twice said it. If no one knows it, don't blame me for that. Blame yourself. You don't study the Quran. Twice has Allah said in the Quran that He taught the Quran to Jesus. So why did He teach the Quran to Jesus? Answer, it's because Jesus has to come back. That's why. You need only 2 peanuts worth of common sense to understand. Because Jesus is going to return one day, Allah taught Him the Quran. So if Jesus is coming back, And if Jesus is taught the Quran, but also in addition to being taught the Quran, the verse twice says he was also taught the Torah and taught the Gospel.
Mm.
And in between the Quran on one side and the Torah and the Gospel on the other side, Allah gave him wisdom. Allah sent the Quran to people who think. But we have stopped thinking. Iqbal was so correct. We have stopped thinking. If you think and you study this verse, you will see why Allah taught him the Quran and taught him the Torah and Gospel and put wisdom in between. Answer? It's because when he comes back, he's not coming back only to his ummah. He's also coming back to perform a function with this ummah of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. For that reason, he needed the Quran. And because he's between two ummahs and therefore two Khilafah states, one in Mecca led by the Imam, one in Jerusalem led by him, which will be the ruling state in the world. And he has to be between these two as the supreme legal thinker, the supreme law advisor and judicial ruler. Between the two, he needs wisdom. So there are going to be two ummahs at the end of time, and both of them will have to be Khilafah states. For his ummah, we know he can do it himself. But for this ummah, it's hopeless. Who is going to be the Khalifa of this ummah? Is it going to be Ayatollah Khamenei? Who is going to be Khalifa of this ummah? Is it going to be the president of Egypt? Or those Yankee puppy dogs who are now ruling over Pakistan? Answer, it is impossible. Impossible. No one can do it. To bring back to the Sunni world of Islam any semblance of a Khilafah state of what Imam Khomeini did in Iran. It's impossible on this side. The only way possible for the world of Sunni Islam to be restored to a Khilafah state is through a divine intervention. That is the rationale for the advent of Imam al-Mahdi. And so therefore, logically speaking, the advent of the Imam has to precede the return of Isa alayhi salam.
I see.
This is my reasoning.
So just to say,
the advent of the Imam is justified for this reason, that it is impossible to bring the Sunni world of Islam back to any semblance of a Khilafah state. Impossible without a divine intervention.
What is the traditional Sunni scholarship's perspective on this particular assertion?
I think you're going to have to ask them because I'm too embarrassed to answer.
No, I think I'll let you answer, then I'll call one of them along and maybe we'll have a discussion with them as well.
I am too embarrassed to answer. I'm in the same boat with Iqbal. Iqbal said this Sunni world of Islam stopped thinking 500 years ago. I echo what he said.
Well, the doors of Ijtihad were closed a long time ago, that much we know, but thinking about how you survive in a modern era, of course, especially within the light of this eschatology and wanting to know, what the signs are, what will happen, so that you could align yourself with the good. Because I guess one of the things that, whether you're Muslim or Christian, you don't want to end up on the wrong side of this eschatological, analysis. I mean, there is the dark side, of course, that we now have to mention, because along with the notion of Imam Mahdi and the Messiah coming, Jesus Christ, there's also Sufyani and Dajjal. What's your take on the Sufyani and the Dajjal?
even mention the name Sufyani. I do not comment on Sufyani. I will only take those hadiths which I feel some measure of an assurance that I understand.
Mm.
The rest of the hadith, I leave it to those more learned than myself. Let them comment on
Sure.
it. Don't comment. So yes, I can comment on Dajjal,
Mm.
but I can't comment on Sufyani.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the Dajjal, he precedes the Mahdi and Christ. Is that the way it works in Islam? And then where does the Dajjal or the Antichrist within the Christian tradition come in?
Answer: the Antichrist is Dajjal. The Christian Antichrist is Dajjal, the false Messiah. Answer: he wants to impersonate the true Messiah. And in order to impersonate the true Messiah, he has to rule the world from Jerusalem. In order to rule the world from this Jerusalem, he has to employ the most sophisticated deception you could ever dream of.
Mm.
That's why he got the name Dajjal. Among his most dangerous deception, through which he eventually gets to rule the world, is his capacity to enslave mankind. And that's where we are heading. Neither the Shia world of Islamic scholarship nor the Sunni world of Islamic scholarship, and least of all that miserable state called Pakistan, ruled by Yankee puppy dogs, none of them understand how he's moving incrementally towards enslaving all of mankind with a bogus monetary system. A bogus monetary system and a bogus and deceptive banking system. I have been to Iran several times. I have met with the Ayatollahs, and only two Ayatollahs. One, may Allah have mercy on his soul, a very noble, oh, what a noble man he was, Ayatollah Shirazi. I met him in Qom, and such a humble man, and such a brilliant man who understood the subject of riba. And me, I will take hours and hours and hours to explain the subject. And this man sat down with me and with two jugs, one with water and one with lemonade. And in 10, 15 minutes, he explained the subject of riba in such a way that was so beautiful. May Allah have mercy on his soul because he's passed away now. That Ayatollah understood the danger of riba that Iran does not understand. And then Ayatollah bin Asadi in Shiraz, and he had no qualms in talking to me and saying to me about the Iranian rial and the Iranian Toma. He said, this is the heart of all the evil of this country. The very heart. And then I met some of the most advanced Ayatollahs in Iran. And speaking to them on the subject of money was like speaking to a stone wall. They had no knowledge of the subject, and their minds were blocked from the subject. And so many Ayatollahs were saying to me, Sheikh, you must meet with the Rahbar, the Ayatollah Khamenei. Sheikh, if you go and speak to him and explain to him that this paper money is bogus, it's fraudulent, it's haram, then he can change the whole system in Iran.
Yeah.
I said, I'll never do such a thing.
Well, this is touching on what I think could be linked to the Dajjalic system, because Dajjal, on the one hand, from the eschatological little I know, he is a physical character. He's a being. He's a person, an individual. Some even describing him as having a one eye, and there are all sorts of descriptions that are linked to him. But the run-up to the coming of Dajjal fascinates me. And you talk about riba, you talk about systems, you talk about the idea of Jerusalem and the Dajjal perhaps being there. And we live in times now where red heifers are being potentially sacrificed in Jerusalem by that other strand of monotheistic eschatology or Abrahamic eschatology, which is our Jewish brethren. You actually met with two of these gentlemen and discussed various things. I didn't want to bring them into it, but it seems that now you've raised this issue of the Dajjal and the current system, where we know that Christian Zionism actually is totally rooted in the idea of pushing for the Jewish version of the end of times, and they have their take on it, and that's very different from what the guys, the Room Fraternity of Russia that you talk about. What's your take on that? Do you think that actually this is all part of the evolution towards the Dajjal? Because you've also talked in your writings and your discourses about Pax Britannica leading to Pax Americana, and us now moving into Pax Judaica. Is it connected?
Well, I cannot comment on Christian eschatology. I told you that before. I prefer that they explain their eschatology. However, my studies in Islamic eschatology have led me to the conclusion that when the Quran speaks in this ayah mutashabiha, meaning there are two kinds of verses in the Quran, and the second is a verse which cannot be understood unless it is interpreted. However, don't make the mistake of ever interpreting the Quran and claiming you're correct. Don't be a fool. Don't create a sectarian movement on such foolishness. None at all. When you interpret the Quran, always say Allah knows best. Because only Allah, not even the Rahbar, only Allah can confirm that an interpretation is correct. So the Quran speaks in Surah Al-Mursalat, and it warns those who have rejected the truth about the Messiah in particular. Warn them, prepare now for a shadow which will comprise of three parts. Intaliku ba'adawuza billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Intaliku ila zillin. Zill means a shadow. Zi thalasa shu'ab. Thalata means three. Shu'ab means a shadow.
Three shadows.
So prepare for a shadow comprised of three parts. I have interpreted that shadow to be Dajjal. Yes, I am the first. I don't know of anyone else in history of Islam who's done that. But that does not worry me at all. I am convinced that I am correct, but Allah knows best, and I don't want anyone to accept my view unless you are convinced that it is correct. And I'm not going to engage in any boxing match over the shadow.
Sure.
I consider the shadow to be comprised of three parts. So in my study of Dajjal, I do what no one else has done.
Which is?
I always look for footprints of Dajjal appearing in three parts. And so when I saw, like a student of international relations, I saw the emergence for the first time in history of an actor appearing on the stage of history. Never before. Suddenly, this actor appears on the stage of history and commands the stage. And that was Britain. Napoleon had such contempt for Britain. He referred to Britain as a nation of shopkeepers. And yet Britain commands the stage. By 1914, when the First World War took place, Can you imagine that this little island, a nation of shopkeepers, commanded the seas of the world,
Yes, incredible.
commanded control over every significant naval port in the whole world? Is this by accident? If so, then I should eat my biryani and go home and sleep.
Yeah.
And continue what Iqbal has said. Don't bother to think. There's no use in thinking. Knowledge is a package. The knowledge of the Quran is a package. The package is already sealed. All you have to do is to transfer this package from one generation to the other, whether it be Darul this or Darul that or Qum. You just have to transfer it mechanically. That is what Iqbal said about contemporary Islamic scholarship. I said, no, the shadow is Dajjal. And therefore, this is the first stage of the shadow, because I see Britain with an unnatural and inexplicable obsession with Jerusalem, obsession with the Holy Land. And then when Britain became the ruling state in the world, it was not only on the basis of military power.
Mm.
A military power which had at its foundation a scientific and technological revolution on which I could speak for some time, but we don't have that time.
No.
Britain became Pax Britannica also because of control over money. Removing gold and silver from the market and replacing it with paper, parading as money with a fictitious value, paper money. And the British sterling pound becomes the international currency. And all the sheep and cattle and goats and camels in the world with nothing in their head except peanuts accepted it as money.
Mm.
That was the first stage.
The first shadow.
Stages of the shadow. And then as a student of international affairs, I saw the mysterious movement of Pax Britannica to Pax Americana. Britain is not so secure because Britain is off the coast of Europe, just the English Channel.
Mm.
Dajjal needed something more secure to do his wickedness. So he goes across the Atlantic Ocean and he finds a huge land out there with a nice, lovely people living there. And these people had so much respect for nature that no one will pump sewage into a river.
Mm. No
one will pump sewage into a river. No, these people,
Native Americans,
worship the river. And these people are treated as subhuman. And they're exterminated. We are the chosen people of the Lord God. And they exterminated them like cockroaches. This is Dajjal's work for Pax Americana. And now you need to build overnight.
Mm.
You need to build the most powerful state in the world. You can't do that with normal construction methods. You cannot do that with normal construction methods. So you need to enslave millions of Africans. Millions of Africans have to work as slaves to build America overnight into the most powerful state in the world.
Mm.
You need slaves to build your new country.
Sure.
And then the United States of America has a US dollar which replaces the sterling pound. And because I am not one of those who simply eat biryani and go home and sleep, I do a little bit of thinking. I realize that the United States of America is now Pax Americana, and the US dollar has replaced the British pound because you need control over money to control the world, to rule the world. He wants to rule the world. He wants to rule the world from Jerusalem. So he begins by ruling the world from Britain, and then he moves to Britain, ruling the world from the United States, in order eventually to rule the world from Jerusalem. This is my Islamic eschatology. This is how I understand Surah Al-Mursalat, but I still remain a solitary voice crying in the wilderness of Islamic scholarship.
Well, that's absolutely extraordinary and fascinating to see how you've linked it to the real world. So that, in a way, means that Pax Judaica is the final iteration of the Dajjalic shadow, as you say. And you'd imagine that now that Benjamin Netanyahu is literally saying that yesterday's comments I picked up were talking about Israel becoming a primary power, not a secondary power. So he's almost declaring that we're going to be superseding American power with Greater Israel or with this Pax Judaica. That's very much something that they're dreaming about. That seems to be also a possibility, because the technological hub in Israel also makes me think about this, because the miraculous happenings or the powers of Dajjal are often listed within the eschatology, and it's sort of often really very, very miraculous things that he can do, and all sorts of things. And of course, with the digital age, with the coming of nanotechnology, with the coming of all of the other sophisticated scientific discoveries that we have and capabilities, things that we couldn't even have dreamt of many years ago. I mean, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq al-Islam, I think he says in one of his hadith, he says that that time will be one where a believer in the East will be able to visually see a believer in the West. So indicating that there was some connection, something we can do today. I mean, I don't always like to connect hadith to scientific realities today, but that's one that I came across. So is it that in this Pax Judaica period, we're going to get a Dajjal emerging in his full form, and then that becomes the sign that Imam Mahdi and Jesus Christ, or the Messiah, will also be returning? Do you think we're in that period now?
The timeline of events, but first of all, before we return to the timeline of events, Netanyahu is only echoing what Ariel Sharon said about 30 years ago.
I see.
If Netanyahu is now saying we want to be a primary power rather than a secondary power, Ariel Sharon, as Prime Minister of Israel, about 30 years ago, he said, we control the United States. That's right. He told the United States that we control the United States. So Israel is now moving towards a destiny already proclaimed long ago, that a Pax Judaica will replace Pax Americana. This is what is to be found in my book, Jerusalem in the Quran, written 25 years ago. And my world of Islamic scholarship has remained embarrassingly silent in response to my book all the 25 years. You could give them another 25 years, they'll still remain in the cement of bewilderment. I call it methodological bewilderment. Now then, back to the timeline of events. Our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, spoke as only a prophet could speak. And he was speaking to his companion Mu'az ibn Jabal, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And these are his words. Umranu Bayt al-Maqdis Karabu Yatrib, that when Jerusalem is built up, when Jerusalem, therefore, is center stage in the world, built up, for me, center stage in the world, they'll say, which hadith says that? That is what they say. Which hadith says that? So forget them. Forget them. Forget them. When Jerusalem is built up, Umranu Bayt al-Maqdis, for me, when Jerusalem is center stage in the world. Kharabu Yatrib. Yathrib, which is now Medina, would be Kharab. Kharab means destroyed. For me, in solitude, playing no role in the world. playing absolutely no role in the world. This is Medina today. Kharabu Yatrib, Khurujul Malhama. When Medina is in full-on desolation, at that time the Malhama will take place, or Armageddon. And we know that it's going to be a war using weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear weapons. We know that. Why? Because our Prophet said 99 of every 100 combatants will be killed. Conventional war does not do that. Then he went on to say, Khuruj al-Malhama, Fathul Constantinia. That when the Malhama takes place, or Armageddon, the next event to occur would be the conquest of Constantinople.
By whose, Sheikhna?
A Muslim army. لَتَفْتَحَنَّ الْقُنْسْتَنْتِنِيَّةَ. You will most certainly conquer Constantinople. وَلَنِعْمَ الْأَمِيرُ آمِرُهَا وَلَنِعْمَ الْجَيْشُ ذَلِكَ الْجَيْشُ. And he praised the commander, and he praised the army. Now then, the conquest of Constantinople, prophesied by Prophet Muhammad والسلام, is a conquest which will take place after the Great War. The whole of mankind, except the Turkish people, all of mankind, except the Turkish people, and those in the Balkans who worship Turkey, all of mankind know that the Great War has not yet taken place. I can't do anything for the Turkish people, whether they're on the secular side or on the Ottoman side. Both of them, I can't do anything for them. Let them remain where they are. A hopeless people. The Great War will take place, and then after that, one hadith says 7 months, the other says 7 years. After that comes the conquest of Constantinople. So the two most important cities in the end time are Jerusalem and Constantinople. These are the two most important cities in the end time. Constantinople is important because of the relationship that must exist between this ummah and this ummah. The ummah which follows Muhammad والسلام, and the ummah which follows Jesus. Therefore, the Muslim world and the Christian world. These two ummahs have to come together in friendship and alliance in preparation for the return of the Messiah. And the key city in that reconciliation and friendship and alliance between the two ummahs is Constantinople. Because when a Muslim army conquers Constantinople, then we will return Hagia Sophia to those to whom it rightfully belongs. And Sultan Erdogan cannot stop it. Tell that to him for me.
I'll call him.
A Muslim army conquers Constantinople, and there's reconciliation between these two ummahs, and this is one of the things my book is doing. This book is built trying to bring reconciliation between the Christian, Orthodox Christian, and Muslims. After this reconciliation takes place, only then does Dajjal emerge.
That's when Dajjal. Okay.
Only then does Dajjal emerge in human form. But as soon as Dajjal emerges in human form and he declares, I am the Messiah, my opinion, and you don't have to accept my opinion. unless you're convinced I am correct. My opinion is that Allah will only now send the Imam, not before.
Mm.
The Imam will be sent only after Dajjal has completed his mission of impersonating the Messiah and taking the Banu Israel to the destruction. Then the Imam emerges and the Imam establishes the Khilafah state in Mecca. But when the Imam emerges, and before the Imam, I don't know whether the Imam would have established the Khilafah state or not yet. Maybe he would have done it. Then Allah will send Nabi Isa alayhi salam. This is the timeline of events.
That clears it up. That gives us a good framing and a good basis for maybe continuing this discussion, because we didn't talk about Yajuj Majuj, we haven't talked about Judgment Day. There's another phase after the time. I mean, of course, the Christians talk about the kingdom of heaven and Christ ruling over this kingdom. That's an entirely fascinating period as well, when the rule of law is based on divine justice. That would be an interesting thing. And then what happens in the period after that? That's another phase to perhaps discuss in our next connection. But I have to say we've run out of time, Sheikh, and it's been an absolutely fascinating journey, so much more that I could have asked, and I'm sure that questions will occur in my mind later. But in April, I'm sure we're going to reconvene again for our third iteration of this conversation around Islamic eschatology and its link to the rest of the world and its relevance to our present period and our future. But any last comment from you, any conclusive comment? I'll let you have the last word on that.
Continue the good work you're doing, Brother Sayyid Mohsen Abbas. Continue the good work you're doing, yes.
Thank you very much. And to our audience, well, you've been taken on a fascinating insight into both Islamic eschatology, according to the detailed investigations of Sheikh Imran Hosein, one, if not the only person who seems to be in this field, specializing totally. I will start looking for others. It's, I think, incumbent on me to, at some stage, bring some of the traditional scholars and put them on the spot and get their opinions on this. And maybe in the future, who knows, we might actually be able to get them to take Sheikh Imran Hosein's research with the kind of with the seriousness that it deserves, because there's been a complaint throughout the show.
It won't be possible.
Well,
unless and until you climb the mountain of methodology.
Good. So
we were attempting to begin that at the beginning of this interview. Then we had to move to another subject. But in order to bring us together for any meaningful dialogue, we have to first climb the mountain.
Agree on the methodology. That's the fascinating thing. I will talk to a few scholars about that and maybe come back to you, Sheikhs. And we're happy to be, if you like, facilitators of the dialogue around this. It's a very important dialogue. Thank you very much for your contribution today. And may Allah give you more tawfiq to be able to go and do more research and give you good health as well along with that. As far as the audience goes, tell us what you think. What's your opinion on what Sheikh Imran Hosein has outlined? How do you think things are panning out? Are we in that period where Dajjal and the return of these great divine men of justice is imminent? We seem to think there is a connection here, but what do you think? Let us know. Do also like, subscribe and share the channel, because it's on you that we rely. Often we're being shadow banned by the likes of YouTube because they don't seem to like what we say, just like many orthodox folk perhaps don't like what some sort of revolutionary scholars say. Or be that as it may, we need your support. Please do whatever you can to back us up as well. And of course, Sheikh Imran Hosein's own channel, which is hugely successful, and we wish him success on that as well. Thank you for watching. Take care.